Hey everyone, this is Sean. So recently I've been designing a lot of source with the Radium Sampler, which is part of Soundminer, Serum, a whole bunch of plugins, and interfacing with all of that with the Roli Lightpad Block. And recently a video that I posted to my Twitter showcased some of the ways in which I was able to modulate a lot of the sound with the Block M, and got a lot of interest in how I was doing that, how I've got things set up, and so I kind of wanted to make this informal video just to walk you through that sound and then one other sound that I made in Radium. And so this might be a bit lengthy, and I apologize in advance if I get a bit rambly, but yeah, we'll just dive in. So here's that sound, and I will post that same video link that I posted to my Twitter in the YouTube description below, so you can check that out. But let's hear how it sounds first. So it's kind of this like morph, pass by, water whoosh. I think it sounds pretty cool, but let's figure out just what it took to get there. So first things first, this is the Radium Sampler, and I've got a few layers here, and it's interfacing with my Lightpad block up here in the corner. But when you get a Lightpad block, if you have one, what you want to do first is set it up. And the way that I've done that is with the Roli dashboard. This is a pretty comprehensive piece of software. It's really easy to use. You can configure the Lightpad block in a whole bunch of different ways. The way that I've currently got it set up is just a 5x5 note grid. I like this way because it gives me a really small form factor for 3 octaves worth of notes that I can trigger, which is really nice, especially in Radium, because all of the pitches get transposed depending on the note. You can adjust those ratios. It's a lot of fun to use that way. But once you've got it selected in the mode that you want, and there's X, Y, and mixer pads, and a whole bunch of different ways you can configure it, you want to go into Edit here. And this is crucial for setting it up with Radium, because Radium currently doesn't support MPE or multi-channel MIDI CC. So what you want to do first is set this MIDI mode here to just single channel. So it's just sending just one channel at a time over to Radium. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and then go over here to the slide CC, and this is crucial for the way that I've got this current patch that you just heard set up. By default, I believe my block was set to something like CC note 74, which is fine, but I wanted it, a little bit more accessible. So I bumped that down to 1, and then I saved that as a preset over to my block, and so it's just constantly loaded. So we'll exit out of this for now. And now that we're in Radium, you can see that there's 6 sample slots over here on the left side. These first 2 look blank, and I'll explain that in a second. They're actually not. And then these next 2 here are audio that's triggered. And then the last 2, I believe, are they're just empty. So let's kind of dive in layer by layer, and I'll show you what's going on. I mentioned this first and second sample look blank, but they're not. What's cool about Radium is that you can assign plugins on any one slot, and those plugins can be, standard VSTs, or they can be VST instruments as well. So these first 2 slots actually have instances of Serum on them, and I'll solo each of these as we kind of go through. But you can see that down here in this effects rack section that I've got a few plugins at the end that are instantiated. Plugin A is that first Serum instance. So this is the Serum patch that I came up with, and we'll solo this layer, and I'll kind of play around with the sound again. So a lot of this layer is going to be just kind of that low, tremolated, kind of wubby layer that would really add some weight as you're passing by when you're performing the entire sound. And all this is really just a wavetable that I've got imported, a whole bunch of filters and effects, and yeah, some envelopes, some LFOs, pretty standard kind of wavetable synthesis. However, what's really doing all of the heavy weight here is the stuff that I'm modulating. So over here in this modulation section, and you'll notice this on every slot, I've got a whole bunch of things assigned to modulation wheel. Modulation wheel isn't really applicable to the Roli Lightpad block because it's just kind of a smooth surface that's pressure sensitive and MPE enabled. So this modulation wheel is actually just MIDI CC value 1 like we set earlier. So from that value, I'm able to drive a whole bunch of different parameters. One of the coolest things I think about Radium is that you can have all these different modulation sources and drive just about anything that you see, from a plugin, from a stock effect, just about anything on screen. So what I've got going here is 3 macros per plugin. And you can see down here in this plugin A on Serum, we've got all 3 macros assigned. And you can actually see that right here as well. So what we want to do is just go down to MIDI CC, and that's just MIDI CC1. In that case, it's called modulation wheel. But again, this is just what our Lightpad block is sending when we slide. So when we slide, we get an entire range of values that we can then use to modulate different parameters. I've got that assigned to macro 2 in plugin A. Plugin A, again, is our Serum instance, and macro 2, if we right click, we can see all of the automatable or modulatable parameters within Serum, and this is applicable for any plugin that you load up in Radium. You can see up here, there's a check next to filter cutoff, so all that's doing is just driving the filter cutoff, and we can see in Serum, if we go back, you'll see this cutoff right here under the filter as I play the sound. And that's me literally sliding up and down on the Roli Lightpad block. And actually, I'll bring that up for you here. Here's the Roli dashboard, and as I slide up and down, you can hear that filter frequency gets changed. And so we'll close out of that. And so yeah, you can set your range there. It doesn't have to start from all the way at the bottom. But for this sound, I thought that was applicable. And I've got a few more macros here assigned, macro 1 and 2. Macro 1 is assigned to the pitch bend. So as I slide on the Roli Lightpad block, the actual pitch of the global pitch of that Serum patch will change with it. And then on macro 3, I've got another filter cutoff, and that filter cutoff is in the effects section of that Serum patch. The other main thing that this patch has, or at least this layer, that I found crucial to this sound was just driving a kind of broad low-pass filter and driving that cutoff. So you can see right here, again, I'm modulating with CC1, and I've got it driven to just or assigned to the stock effect low-pass, high-pass. And that's just right here. And so you can watch this knob as I kind of expressively play. Yeah, so it'll get adjusted, and the filter cutoff will bring in more of those high frequencies, and those will be much more obvious to hear in a couple of the other layers below it. From there, I've just got a limiter, a few other plugins, OTT, and then Tremolator. Tremolator's doing a lot of the work too. You can see right here, I believe, we've got plugin C assigned to macro 1 on plugin C, and that's just Tremolator here. And you'll notice right there as I'm playing, the rate changes. So as I'm playing, the rate will either speed up or decrease, which is really cool, especially adding for some movement to each layer. And I've got that going on a few of these layers as well. So let's move on. We've got this second layer here, and this is, again, looks blank, but it's not. It's actually just another Serum patch that I've got in Radium, and that's loaded up here. We'll solo this layer, and we'll play it. So this is a lot of our higher frequency elements. I wanted to mix kind of the low and the high frequency on 2 separate layers so that I could have more kind of granular control over how those layers sound. So we'll exit out of this, and you can see that this layer almost looks identical to the previous. I believe it was actually a duplicate. Those two together sound like this. So you can hear both of them combined adding a lot more fullness to the sound than just one on its own. From there, we've got some audio in Radium. Radium is a fantastic sampler. It's really built for creating a lot of variation of either sustained source, one-shot source. It's got a whole bunch of different modes. I really won't dive into it here in this video, but I'm finding it really, really powerful and really, really fun to use. So this source here is, I believe, just some water. And if we look over here on the left on the sample, you can see what that source is. I believe this was just taken from some Boom Library construction kit source. And this is just water. It's a long sustained portion of it. But what I like about Radium is you can define where your sample starts. You can loop it in various ways. You can assign an ADSR, a whole bunch of different ways to really sculpt the sound in the design that you're working on. So that layer sounds like this. And so that's a lot of our water element. That's kind of the body of it. And here in this layer, the modulation is doing a lot of similar things. So you can see on the bottom, I've first got kind of a stock phaser going. That's just to give it some more frequency movement. From there, I've got an OTT just to kind of bring up a lot of that detail in the sound, and then a tremolator and a filter freak. And then again, the all-important high pass, low pass that's driving this low pass filter cutoff, which really gives all the movement as you progress through the sound up and down. So from there, we'll go to the fourth layer here. And again, this is just some sustained water. This one's a little bit more white noise, a little bit higher in the frequency spectrum. Again, just to kind of add more detail as the filter cutoff sweeps, you really bring in that kind of closeness of the sound. And again, that layer sounds like this. Kind of like a babbling creek, but I've got a whole bunch of effects here. We've got a phaser, we've got OTT again, tremolator that again is driven from the slide on the Roli block in a very similar way to the first two layers. And then again, a filter freak. I'm not sure if I've got any. Oh, I do. 3 different macros on the filter freak. Let's see how those are moving. Not at all. So never mind. I don't have anything assigned to those, but it is adding, I think, a bit of kind of just automated weight here. Let's see. Yeah, just some kind of lower end resonance that's adjusted just within Filter Freak itself with the threshold. So all those layers together combined with the block and moving my finger around on the pad, and I'll bring up that Roli dashboard again so you can see how that's being affected. We've got this going on. So yeah, I think this is a really fun patch. I had a lot of fun making it and kind of testing the capabilities of the Lightpad, and then also a lot of things that I haven't done in Radium, which was really fun. So we'll close out of this one here. And I want to show you one other patch that I made. This one being more of a one-shot and uses a lot less of the modulation features that the block has. But nonetheless, I thought it was cool and just wanted to show you a bit of the capabilities of Radium. So we'll load that one up here. Got a preset. We'll just drop it on. And we can see that we're using all 6 layers on this one. The other thing that's cool about Soundminer, just stock without the Radium Sampler, is they've got a DSP rack, and that DSP rack will allow you to add effects to your sound and process them even before they hit something like a DAW, before you drag them out or chop them up in any way. What's cool about Radium with the DSP rack is that you can perform all of your sounds in Radium, have all of these plugin slots down here, all of these effects going, and then on top of that, also process them through the DSP rack. And so I've got a DSP rack here that I will load up. All right, so it looks like we've got quite a few plugins going here, but that really gives this specific sound a lot of its modulation and body, and just makes it sound really full and finished. So let me play this one, and we'll hear what it sounds like. I'm going to mute this layer because we'll come back to it. But that one sounds like this. So this one's definitely a lot different than the last. This is more of an electric kind of pass-by whoosh sound. However, I'm not performing this in the same way that I was previously with the Lightpad Block and kind of moving my finger around. This is all done via one-shots, and you can see in each of these layers, I've got a quick attack on all of them. So the sound will pretty much come in immediately, with this one being the longest at even just a second, so it's pretty short. So we'll take you through layer by layer here, and we'll kind of do the same thing that we did with the previous patch. So on this first layer, we've got some, again, boom library construction kit. Looks like some electric source. We'll hear what that sounds like on its own. Really fizzly, high-end, kind of snappy, almost static white noise. But again, in the context, it brings out a lot of that high-end energy. And we've got quite a few effects going here. We've got the chopper, which we'll come back to in a second in this modulation section. Some phaser, again, to give it just a bit of frequency, movement, and modulation. And then we've got a saturator, and then a couple of plugins here, just a simple EQ, and then limiter. So this is a pretty standard layer here. This chopper, though, that I was referring to, is actually being modulated by just some built-in LFOs within Radium. Radium is fantastic because down here it's got all these various envelopes that you can use to modulate each individual slot. Here I've got this LFO going. And right here, you can choose to re-trigger it every time that you press down on a note, or you can choose for it to just be free running. For this patch, I like free running because it means that every single time that I play a note, it means I'm going to get a different starting rate, a different ending rate. It's just going to add a little bit more variety to each single variation that I'm playing. So once you've done that, again, you just go into this modulation section, choose a source. Right here, we're going to do LFO1, and this is just kind of a simple sine wave shape. And from there, we'll choose a destination. We'll go down to the chopper, which is just a tremolo effect, and we'll choose the rate. And you can see right here, this is the speed at which our modulation range is changing, and from right here you can see the range kind of bounds. And so right down here you can see just on its own the rate is changing. And so when we play that, according to our depth, you can hear that tremolo, which is fantastic. You don't even have to think about it. So let's move on to the second layer and play that. So this one's definitely more kind of laser zappy, almost slinky-like. Very similar things going on in terms of effects here. No modulation on this one. However, I do want to highlight another feature of Radium that I do think makes it unique for sound design. So again, we've got the phaser, we've got a saturator, a limiter, and then just another EQ. However, notice every time that I'll play a note, you'll see these regions here randomly become selected. And you can see the playheads progressing with each note press for each of these regions. When you're loading sounds into Radium, one of the easiest ways to get sounds in for a ton of variation is to define Radium regions. And you can do that just in the sample playback of your normal search window. And once you've done that, and I've got 6 here, once you load that into a Radium slot, every single time that you play a note, each of your regions will be randomized for playback, which means that if you've got a whole bunch of variations in a single sound, you can have even more variation on each playback in the patch in its entirety, which I just think is awesome. I know very few samplers that are built for sound design in this way, and I just find it so powerful. So we'll move on to the third layer. Sounds like this. A little bit more of our crackly layer that we had from the first slot here, but this one's got a little bit more body. Again, in context, it's just about spreading that frequency spectrum, so it's a balanced sound. Not every sound has that same need, but I find when I'm designing source that's almost complete out of the box in Radium, it's kind of one of my goals lately. So again, not a whole lot going here. We've got some high pass that's just cutting off the extreme lows, some EQ. Again, that chopper that's being triggered by the LFO, and the LFO in this case is restarting every single time. But I've also got another modulation source here, which is random start. So when you've got long source like this that I've dragged in, if I were to take, let's see, this random start off and play this back, and you know what? We'll disable the chopper so you can really hear this. You'll notice every single time that I'm pressing a note, it's starting at the beginning of this audio. It's undesirable if you're trying to make a lot of variations because you're always going to get that same few seconds of the starting sample that you've loaded in. So with this modulation source, and it's again just random start, and we'll enable it, you can choose your range here, but that's just basically the entirety of the file. Now every time that I play it, you can see that I get a playhead in a totally new location, which is awesome because, again, every single time that I play this, I'm going to get a different part in this source. So we'll turn on this chopper again, and we will move on to layer 4. Layer 4, just like that first patch that I showed you, looks empty. It's not. It's actually just a serum patch here that I've got going. A pretty simple one at that. There's not a lot of additional effects, just an OTT and again another tremolo chopper effect. However, this patch sounds like this. I'll get serum up. So this one's a lot of fun. This one's definitely our more kind of sci-fi electric sound. What's cool about Serum is that you can import any audio you'd like right into these wavetable slots here, and then edit them and kind of refine them as you need. Here I've got a wavetable that I believe comes with Serum, but over here this one's blank, and unfortunately the Serum patch doesn't save what I've imported. But I'm almost positive this is actually some more electric source that I've made into a wavetable. So I've imported that, cleaned it up a bit, and I've got 2 layers going that kind of give the entirety of the sound along with a whole bunch of effects. And then of course, some phaser doing quite a bit of work here. But again, that layer sounds like this. So pretty cool. When combined with all the other layers, I really think that gives it all its character. So we'll move on to the 5th layer here. And this 5th layer is, again, just some electric source that I've grabbed. This one's from Mattia Celato, fantastic library called Polarity. I've grabbed that out of there, and this one sounds like this. So this one's fun. This gives it kind of some low-end weight and a bit more of that kind of growl. But I've got some interesting modulation here specific to my Roli Lightpad Block, and this one's called Channel Pressure. Channel Pressure is really cool as opposed to like a traditional note on or off of a MIDI controller. Channel Pressure actually allows you, because the Roli Lightpad Block is sensitive enough, the membrane's sensitive enough that as you're pushing down, you can actually get different CC values to output. And so I've assigned that for a harder push, a softer push, to pitch. So as I'm playing harder or softer, you can see right here, there's a live pitch wheel, and this is just kind of the adjustment that I'm making. It's getting adjusted as I play harder or softer, which I think is really fun, and again, just adds a little bit of human expressiveness to the patch. And then from there, I'm also modulating with envelope 6 on the master volume. And envelopes are really cool in Radium. They're a recent addition in that you can tell any one individual slot to go look at another slot's pre-fader volume output, and then basically just modulate whatever you want according to it. So from there, I've got envelope 6, the volume of that one, modulating the volume of this one. And this is, again, just my master volume. And so altogether, this sounds like, oh, and I can't forget, I've got this DSP processing rack that I mentioned before. This is also doing a lot of the heavy lifting. From here, we've got an OTT, we've got a black box HG2, which is just fantastic on electrical source for bringing out and saturating a lot of those frequencies that otherwise would get lost. From there, we've got some R bass. M ratio MB is really cool. I'm enjoying this one a lot. Again, this is a previous video. Shout out to Alex Barnhart for showing me this. This one is awesome for bringing out a lot of the tonal, almost artifacty elements in a sound. I'll crank this up in the patch in its entirety, and you can kind of hear how that's affecting it. So that's at stock, like 60%. Here's 100. And again, that's totally cool on its own. I've opted for something closer to 60. From there, we've got a Filter Freak. And again, Filter Freak is just phenomenal for adding movement to sound. I've got this one being modulated in this tweak panel here. It's modulating based on my input threshold, the resonance mod, and then the overall frequency, how high this cutoff is going. You can see once it passes that threshold, we're just slamming open that filter and adding, again, all that movement to that kind of electrical whoosh. From there, we've got some recenter. Recenter's not doing a whole lot here. I believe we're just mono filtering below 90 hertz. And then from there, we've got some very minimal EQ, some soothe, just to kind of balance out a bit of the resonances. That's the spiky resonances, super high up in the frequency range, and then just a limiter. So again, that entire patch sounds like this. And so I've got one more layer here that I haven't discussed, and that one's layer 6. Layer 6 is actually a previous design that I've made in Radium with a lot of the similar techniques, but I've dragged it back in as now source to add to this patch. So if I wanted this patch to, for example, instead be less of a whoosh, less of a pass-by, I can add something a little bit more transient. So that's this layer here. And these are some impacts, again, that I've designed, and we'll combine that with all the other layers, and now we've got kind of a more impactful pass-by with a tail. So definitely cool, definitely add some variety. And what's great about Radium, again, is you can just solo or layer or mute any of these layers and end up with unique source from every individual slot. And every individual slot also has a slot recorder. So as you're recording all of your takes, as you're performing them, you can have those split into stems and then use those source in other ways on their own. This layer sounds like this on its own. Pretty similar to the pass-by that we had on its own, but again, we can just layer it together and get a totally new, unique sound. Not a lot going on here, just some OTT, some EQ, and an enforcer, which I'm loving a lot. And this enforcer is actually getting modulated. You can see these values changing right here in this high pitch range, and LFO is just driving that in the same way that it was driving previous values on other slots. And so I've got that going for every single time, and we'll crank up the wet here. So every time that I'm hitting this, you're getting a different starting pitch, which is cool when you're making things like bouge bass drops. You can have some more variety in where those pitches are starting. So we'll drop this back down to 35. And it sounds like this again. Just adding some low end body. And from there, it again just passes through this DSP rack, and the entire sound, again, just sounds like this. And so when I'm ready to print that, literally all I have to do is come up here, make sure my sample rate is set the way that I want it to. For this, it'll be 96 or 192 so that I can then either further pitch or just have more flexibility in the future for my source. All I do is hit record. And the second that I press a note, recording starts. When I'm all set, I just hit record again. And now you can see over here, I've got that source right down here. We'll turn off the DSP rack here. And that's what we've just recorded. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. I apologize for any kind of rambling or lengthiness to it. Feel free to comment or follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm posting stuff there constantly. I'm really enjoying this process lately. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm still learning all this stuff is the same way that I'm sure a lot of people are. So just trying to have some fun in the process. But hope everyone is staying safe and well. And yeah, take care.